Have you ever sat in the presence of another and felt a draining? Not of your physical energy, but of the very light within you. There is a shadow that walks among us, cloaked not in darkness, but in a dazzling charm. This is not simple pride. It is a profound emptiness, a spiritual hunger that mistakes power for substance. If you do not recognize the stillness of its heart, you will not simply lose your way. You will forget the path back to yourself. This shadow does not merely believe it is higher. It stands on a lonely peak of its own making, assuming it is the only mountain in the landscape. It moves through the world with an unshakable sense of its own light, placing it above the river's flow, above the season's change, and certainly above you. But this fortress of light is not built from inner strength. It is a brittle shield, a palace of ice constructed to protect a fragile, shivering core, a part of the self that was perhaps once lost in the dark and never shown the way home. So rather than walk through that darkness, it created a new sun, a blinding, untouchable glare. It must be the peak, because the valley feels like an abyss. This illusion of the summit is not a harmless dream. It is dangerous, for it bends the world around its own reflection. When a person lost in this shadow enters a space, they do not see other souls. They see reflections, tools, or obstacles. You are a clear pool so long as you reflect their light back to them. The moment you ripple with your own life, you become a disturbance. You are never seen for the water you are. You are perceived only through their need to remain the highest point on the horizon. If your own inner mountain casts a shadow on their own, if you possess your own stillness, your own wisdom, your own light, you are not seen as a fellow traveler. You are perceived as a storm cloud threatening their solitary peak. And all storms, in their mind, must be scattered. This is where the quiet cold begins. When their fragile illusion is touched by truth, they do not turn inward for warmth. They project ice. Sometimes with a subtle frost in their words, sometimes with a sudden blizzard of scorn, often with a quiet seeding of clouds in the minds of others, all while the sun of their smile continues to shine. They must remain the highest peak, not from a desire to do harm, but because to descend would be to dissolve into the void they so fear. And understand this, their height is not a measure of strength, it is a measure of their fear. Deep inside, they carry a terror that if the world ceases to mirror their light, they will simply vanish into the surrounding air. So when you find yourself in the orbit of such a being, you are not with someone who simply knows their own worth. You are with a soul whose entire existence is a story they tell themselves, a story they must defend at any cost. This makes their winds unpredictable, their weather volatile. Reason cannot reach them, for the truth of the valley is not their truth. The only reality is the one that keeps their peak in the clouds. They will bend the light, deny the seasons, and command the tides, not because they are out of touch with reality, but because the survival of their illusory self depends on it. This is not self-love. It is not the mountain's quiet dignity. It is self-obsession, born from a forgotten wound, and it leaves a barren landscape in its wake, in the gardens of family, friendship, and connection, because no other flower can grow in the shade of a sun that believes it is the only source of light. A soul in shadow does not connect. It echoes. When you first encounter them, it can feel like finding a lost part of your own spirit. They reflect your deepest river, your highest peak, your quietest valley. They finish the silent prayers of your heart. They have walked the same paths, felt the same rain, dreamt the same sky. It feels like a return to the source. But what you are truly experiencing is not a meeting of two rivers. It is the river meeting a perfectly polished stone that mimics its every sound. A person lost in this way does not build bridges by showing you their own shore. They build a flawless reflection of your shore to make you feel at home. To guide the river, you must first become the river. This mirroring is their most profound art. It is not mere flattery. It is a deep, strategic listening disguised as presence. They study your inner landscape, not from a spirit of kinship, but as a mapmaker. What makes your waters flow freely? Where are the dams of your past? What droughts do you fear? They gather this knowledge like water in a well. In the beginning, they use it to nourish you. You feel seen, understood, sacred. But once the river of your trust flows steadily toward them, once your own banks have softened, the season changes. What they once nourished, they begin to parch. The very currents they celebrated in you become reasons for the river to be tamed. Their empathy is not true empathy. It is the echo of empathy. They do not feel your flow. They observe its patterns and replicate the appropriate currents, the way a master artist can paint a storm without ever feeling the wind. It is all form, no substance. They give just enough rain to keep your garden growing toward them, while quietly installing the gates. If you ever divert your course or question the map they have drawn for you, the reflection shatters, and what was once kinship becomes a cold, hard stone. The danger of this path is that it does not just confuse your sense of them. It clouds your sense of your own waters. You begin to question your own flow, to doubt your own currents. How could a soul who knew your river so well suddenly build a dam, suddenly seem so foreign, so unmoved? That conflict stills your own waters into confusion, and the shadow self thrives in this stillness. The more the water is muddied, the more control they have over it. This is not connection, it is containment. You are not loved for the river you are. You are valued for the reflection you provide, a mirror for their sun, their moon, their stars. The moment you begin to rain, you are either abandoned or your waters are poisoned. Often both. True connection asks for two rivers to flow, side by side, each honoring the other's journey to the sea. But a soul in shadow is incapable of this. To reveal their own riverbed is to risk showing their own rocks and shallows. Reciprocity would mean admitting other rivers exist, and honesty would risk revealing that their own spring has run dry. So instead, they echo, they contain, and when the performance is over, you are left stranded, wondering if the life you shared, the flow, the depth, the currents, was ever truly water. The silent answer is that it was not. Containment is the primary practice of the shadow self, but it is rarely achieved with force. They work like a patient gardener who slowly, carefully, trains a plant to grow around a stone. They create imbalance not by accident, but by design. In that imbalance, they are centered. In that confusion, they become the guide. The more you doubt your own landscape, the more power they have to define it for you. This is the art of muddying the waters, not as a single act, but as a way of being, unraveling your sense of where your own river flows, one subtle disturbance at a time. The one in shadow does not just obscure truth. They become the source of a new truth. They will deny the words that just left their lips. They will redraw the map of yesterday. Their currents will shift so blatantly, so strangely, that your own inner compass begins to spin, and you assume you are the one who is lost. This is their design. For if they can make you question your memory, your intuition, your own internal sky, then they can offer you their compass as the only one that works. When they succeed, they do not just guide the journey, they possess the traveler. It begins with a subtle chill, a condescending breeze when you share a feeling, a sharp stone disguised as a smooth pebble, a passive redirection of your flow that leaves you wondering if you are flooding your own banks. And once this begins, they confirm it. They use external things to reinforce their truth. Wealth, status, the respect of others. Over time, the pattern deepens. You begin to feel the weather changing before the clouds even form. You practice how to flow in ways that won't disturb their quiet pond. Your world becomes smaller. You become hyper, aware of their climate and increasingly forgetful of your own. A soul in shadow does not want harmony. Harmony is a dance of equal partners. It is mutual flow. They cannot be in harmony because it threatens their stillness. So they stir the waters, then ask why you are so turbulent. They withhold the sun without warning, then act puzzled when your leaves begin to wither. They plant seeds of doubt between you and the other plants in the garden, isolating you slowly until the only sun you have left is the one they shine upon you. If you ever start to grow toward another light, They will often respond not with self-reflection, but with a storm, flooding you with affection one moment and bringing a frost the next. This is not the random weather of a passionate heart. It is a controlled climate designed to keep you off balance, to keep you reaching for the warmth of their approval, to keep you seeking the memory of their first light, the one that made you feel chosen, seen, alive. But that sun was a lantern, and in this manufactured climate, your intuition, the part of you that knows when to grow and when to rest, withers. You stop trusting your roots. You stop reaching for the sky. You become small, easy to manage, easy to contain, and the one in shadow, now the master of your garden, stands peacefully in the center of the storm they created, offering you shelter from a rain they themselves summoned. This is the nature of this shadow's path. It does not break you with a single storm. It makes you grow yourself, leaf by leaf, root by root, until you forget the forest you came from. The shadow self does not seek connection. It seeks energy. More precisely, it seeks a source. This source is not love in the way the sun loves the flower. It is a steady stream of focus, light, warmth, and life force that feeds its own inner fire, for it cannot generate its own. It may use the language of love. It may perform the gestures of caring, but these acts are a form of planting. They are not offerings of life. They are investments meant to secure a harvest, your devotion, your energy, your turning towards their light. In the beginning, this can feel like standing in the full summer sun. A person in shadow knows how to shine their light when they choose. They will make you feel like the center of the garden, not because they truly see the flower you are, but because your turning toward them proves that they are the sun. As long as you grow towards them, as long as your petals are open only to them, they will pour their warmth on you. They may even place you on a pedestal, showering you with a constant, generative light. But a garden cannot thrive this way. The moment you begin to draw from the earth for your own needs, the moment you close your petals to rest or simply turn towards the broader sky, their light begins to dim. What follows is a cold that feels like a betrayal. They become distant, sharp, even cruel. When you reach for their warmth to understand what has changed, they act burdened by your needs, as if your very desire for light is a weed in their perfect garden. This is the great paradox. They demand your constant sunward gaze, yet offer no true, sustained warmth in return. They feed on your light, yet starve you of theirs. Your expressions of admiration become an expected tithe. Their silence becomes a season of winter. Your pain becomes just another part of the landscape. This dynamic creates a lopsided ecosystem where you are always giving your light, and they are always absorbing it. You start working harder to please the sun, to earn back the warmth it once gave freely. You shrink your leaves. You bend your stem. You make yourself smaller, more agreeable, more pleasing, all in the hope of receiving the rays that once felt endless. But they do not return in the same way. Because once the shadow self feels it has secured your devotion, it no longer sees the need to pretend it is a real sun. It has already captured your energy. This withholding is intentional. By creating a drought, they make you thirst for their rain. They want you hungry for their light. They want you seeking the sun that once made you feel alive. That way, they remain the center of your world. It is a cycle of sun and frost, a push and pull that mimics the patterns of thirst. You never know when the next drop of rain will fall, so you wait, hoping it still might. But it rarely does, because to them, your value is not in the flower you are. It is in the light you provide to their emptiness. Once that utility fades, so does their warmth. In its place is a cold emptiness that leaves you wondering if you were ever truly a flower in their garden, or just a source of fuel. There is one thing the soul in shadow fears more than darkness, more than solitude, and that is being seen. Beneath the dazzling sun of their persona lies a deep, dark void of self they are determined to keep hidden at all events. Every story they tell, every current they redirect, every mask of light they wear serves one central purpose: to protect the false self from being seen for what it is, a fragile echo an empty space, a place of deep shadow. To maintain this performance of light, they are always on a stage. In the shared garden, they present a polished form-wise, bright, even humble when the role calls for it. They work to cultivate devotion and respect. But behind the curtain, the story changes. When no one is watching who matters to their performance, their behavior becomes chaotic, cold, and controlling. They turn their shadows on those closest to them, not because those people are without light, but because they are witnesses. And a witness is a threat. Anyone who sees behind the mask, who begins to connect the light of the stage with the darkness backstage, becomes a danger. At first, the shadow self may try to bring them back into the illusion with more performance stories laced with vulnerability, promises of a new season, moments of manufactured warmth. But if that fails, the weather turns. They go on the offensive. They whisper, they distort, they change the story. They create a new narrative where they are the sun, scorched victim, and you are the storm, the weed, the blight. It is a war of perception, and they are relentless. This fear of being seen drives them to preemptively cast shadows on anyone who might tell the truth. Past companions, friends, even their own kin who step out of the prescribed role are labeled as unstable or dark. They will isolate you from the rest of the garden, planting seeds of doubt in other soils, all while maintaining their own posture as the centered, life-giving one. Their ability to maintain control depends on this two-faced reality. They must be seen as the sun in public while controlling the climate in private. The more you see, the greater a threat you become. They cannot allow true closeness because closeness invites seeing. Vulnerability, the very soil of real connection, is terrifying. It asks for honesty, and honesty could reveal the hollow space beneath the performance. So instead of opening, they deflect. Instead of admitting fault, they blame. Instead of receiving truth, they rage or retreat into silence. Every reaction is a defense, designed to keep the emptiness hidden. The deep sadness is that the shadow self is not just hiding from the world, it is hiding from itself. But in doing so, it destroys the very connections that might bring true light. Anyone who sees their true self becomes a liability, not an ally. And so, the performance must be protected, no matter the cost. Because to be seen doesn't just threaten their image, it threatens the entire illusion they have built for their survival. The most sorrowful thing about this shadow is not its coldness, but the silence that surrounds it. These patterns do not persist in isolation. They endure because they are hidden, excused, and unspoken. People do not speak up because they are often unable. They are too lost in the fog, too wounded, or too weathered by the storm to find the words. That silence becomes the soil in which the shadow grows. For as long as no one names the pattern, it thrives. It becomes normal, even right, and the soul in shadow is left free to continue the cycle with a new face, a new garden, a new performance. This silence is not by chance. It is cultivated by the shadow self. They create a climate where speaking your truth feels like a dangerous act. You fear you won't be believed. You fear being painted as the unstable one. You fear losing the garden, the community, the family that exists within the shadow's controlled world. They subtly guide others to remain quiet, to doubt their own perceptions, to question what their own roots are telling them. When that happens, the shadow doesn't just win control, it erases the truth of the landscape itself. Once your truth has been rewritten, you are easier to manage, easier to prune, easier to discard. But the drought does not stop with the single flower being targeted. The silence ripples outward. Children raised in these gardens learn to shrink their own leaves to keep the peace. Partners learn to endure the frost, mistaking it for the changing of seasons. Friends, colleagues, and communities look away because facing the truth of the climate is too uncomfortable, too disruptive. And so the shadow deepens, not because no one feels it's cold, but because no one names it. To break that silence is the first act of returning to your own source. It is also the first step toward finding your own light, naming what you have experienced, the redirected currents, the manufactured storms, the withholding of warmth, the quiet cold, gives form to what felt like a formless fog. It reclaims the compass from the one who took it. It sends a message: I see the pattern. I will not be silent. I will no longer carry the secret of this false sun. Shadows do not exist because they are powerful. They exist because we allow them to hide. The most pervasive are not the ones that rage, but the ones that smile, that charm, that mimic, that mask their inner cold with charisma. They depend on the silence of others to keep their performance intact. They fear being seen because the light of truth is their undoing. If you have witnessed these patterns in another or in a moment of stillness in yourself, the time to speak is now, not with the fire of vengeance, but with the simple light of truth. Because truth disrupts the performance, it reveals the mask, it forces what was hidden into the open. And in that quiet light, the power of the shadow begins to dissolve. Silence allows the shadows to walk as if they are real. To speak is not just to survive. It is to reclaim the garden. It is to find your own sun. And above all, it is to be free.